Hello and welcome to the video and live streaming show. My name's John Lacey, and as always, I'm joined by Sam Proof. Today on the show, we're talking all about video thumbnails, and we're going to spend some time on the video thumbnail couch, the therapy couch, because I don't know about you, but having to create these things week in and week out is driving me a little nuts. So we're going to explore that today. But Sam, we are going out live to all the various places, so if you are watching live, do that hashtag team live thing that I'm so fond of, and if you're watching later on, you can do hashtag team replay. But Sam, how are you going? How's your week been?
Good. It's been kind of a blur. We're finally like settling into the new place. Amanda's just wrapping up her last week at work, so her summer is actually just about to begin. I've been spending a lot of time with the kids and at the same time trying to like do this contract job that I just started as an influencer manager. So it's a crazy kind of whirlwind, and at the same time trying to find just time to do all my own stuff as well. But thankfully, nothing nothing big has happened. So nice even keel. How's everything with you, John?
Everything's going pretty well with me. Again, things have been pretty good. I really can't complain, and congratulations on that new gig. I hadn't heard about that actually until you
Thanks.
just mentioned it, but that sounds exciting. We are going out live to all the various places, so please let us know in the chat where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. But today we're talking all about video thumbnails, and I don't know about you, but they're kind of the bane of my existence in some ways. Because I have to create one every time I create a video, every time I go live. I haven't really done anything in terms of verticals and TikToks and shorts. Like, I don't even think about that
Yeah.
stuff anymore. But in some ways, I think the struggle for me is how many different ways, how many different arrangements can I have where I put one or two people in a frame and a bit of text and some imagery and some branding. So, first of all, Sam, I'm curious, how do you feel about the act of actually creating these video thumbnails? Do you enjoy it?
For the most part, I do. There are times where, uh, I'm apprehensive about it, and I think for the most part, those times are where you're reactively creating thumbnails. And so many of us, I think, do this where we make the video, we do the thing, and at the end we go, what's that thumbnail going to look like? And, if you spend any time on Twitter where other designers of thumbnails are, they're like, don't do the video, make the thumbnail and then do the video. Like, do the video that is the thumbnail. And yeah, when you go into it like that, I really do feel it's a lot easier. Like, even with these shows, we have sort of a preconceived notion of what we're doing, but since it hasn't happened yet, I feel a lot more free to just do big, bold, dumb stuff and be like, I hope we talk about that.
Absolutely. And I just want to dig into the chat. It's funny, I was a little concerned that we had no chat, but it just turned out I forgot to press a button. So
I
let's
also forgot to switch it from my restream chat to you to yours.
yes, like I'm like, are we live? I don't even know
Yeah,
anymore. But hello to Saeed, who's watching from Germany, where it's ridiculous o'clock, and I think Kai is watching from Germany as well. He says that, so
cool.
that's awesome. Hello to Ender Trader, who's a global traveler, so could be literally anywhere. Hello to Roy Kowalski, who's watching from Sydney.
Hey, Roy.
Lynn Williams is watching this live. Fear of missing out in Pennsylvania. So I need all the tips on thumbnails, so bring it on. We will certainly do our best. And again,
Cool.
Right Mix for Business by Sue. And yes, thumbnail designs is making me nuts. The high CTR designs often surprise me. I'm not really sure what the CTR is an abbreviation for, but maybe you
Yeah, I
can tell
was
us.
I was wondering if that was contrast or something else. I'm gonna need to know what side of Pennsylvania Lynn's on, being from Pennsylvania myself originally.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about it, and I guess first of all, Sam, like why are thumbnails important? I mean, it's probably fairly obvious to some of us, but what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it is first and foremost the very first thing that a user is going to see. This is the book cover on your video. This is the billboard that gets, the attention. So like it is the number one thing that will either get them to like pause for a second or scroll away. So yeah, you know, it is this thing that you want to create that stands out and creates either an emotional reaction or makes the user question or just inspires something so that they go, well, wait, what is this?
And I must admit, Suan's just saying that the CTR in that context was click through rate, which
It's
makes
click
total
through
sense.
rate.
And we'll talk
Uh,
about that in our last segment.
Clearly
But I don't think the
not enough
coffee's quite
coffee.
reached my brain yet. But thank
See?
you for that, Suan. Yes, I mean, the packaging, and we hear this advice often, and I'm sure it is literally true. But the title and the thumbnail are those things that may encourage people to click in the first place. So that's kind of the thing that you want to explore a little bit. And again, I mean, let's be real. For YouTube, you don't necessarily need to include a thumbnail. For a video, you can literally sort of let it pick one of three options in terms of the just what's the word I'm looking for, Sam? One of those frames in your video, and just have it work that way. But
Yeah.
I think in some ways we want to think about what might actually entice our audience to click through and watch something. So um, okay, there's so
Yeah.
much happening here, and it's amazing, but
The
it's kind of
chat's
distracting.
going.
So, first of all, Lynn is apparently from the burbs of Philly. So I don't
Nice.
know if
Yeah.
that's your neck of the woods.
I've been
Okay,
there. Yes.
and
Yeah.
Saeed is
Originally from Lower Merion. So yeah,
nice. Okay, I have no idea where any of those places are, but
it's
I
all outside Philly.
yes, it's funny here in Australia. In my state, New South Wales, we have basically two places. One is called Sydney, and one is called outside of Sydney, because Sydney is the only place anybody's ever heard of.
Right.
But
Right.
anyway, back to the content. So Saeed is saying he watched a video about thumbnails the other day. One tip was to show on the image the first thing people will see in the first 5 seconds when they play the video. I like that idea, actually.
That is a good tip. Yes. Because here's the thing: you want to create a thumbnail that grabs attention, but you don't want to be a big liar. Like the clickbait thumbnails, while they will get the click through rate, will destroy you if you don't immediately deliver on that promise. So if you're showing Mr. Beast and the first thing that happens in that video is not related to Mr. Beast whatsoever, they're going to be like, this was just a waste of my time. And they're going to leave, and you're going to get basically penalized because you will lose out on that watch time. So while it might be enticing to do something like that, unless you can actually, deliver on that value prop, it's pointless to do it because you want all the watch time. So make the thumbnail that inspires people to watch the video that you are making.
Absolutely, and I don't know. I think in some ways, like Sam is a very old school YouTuber, and he's always pulling the faces in the thumbnails, and having exciting titles. And I don't want to promise anybody anything that I can't deliver on. And my video titles are just things I think people will search for. So it's like how to do X
Yeah,
and
that's
Y. And in some ways, like I'm just really tired of the entire internet with the marketing and the hyperbolic promises. It's so exhausting to me. But anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's legit, but for me, I kind of approach titles with that sort of SEO feel of like, what is the thing they're searching for? So once I've grabbed the attention, they go, what is this exactly? And then that title is going to clarify like how to make the best thumbnail on YouTube. And they're like, all right, great. That's what I'm looking for, actually. And then the first 5 seconds of the video is like, here's a big cutout of Mr. Beast. No, I'm just kidding. It's going to be, hey guys, we're actually going to talk about this. And I'm going to show you how to do X, Y, and Z, like John did at the beginning. He said, this is what we're going to be talking about. And here are some of the topics within that. You can see right as soon as we get into it, thumbnails, brand, create, and test. Like, there you go. We are talking about the topic. So
absolutely.
you're not going to lose people, hopefully.
And writes, at the end of the day, people will click on the video if the topic is interesting for them. So no matter the thumbnail, only when there are two videos of the same topic, then will it make a difference. I think that's interesting. And it would be interesting to sort of reflect on our own, I guess, YouTube viewing habits to see how true that
Yeah.
might be. And again, I imagine it's different for different people, but we'll talk about this more in probably the next segment. But I think in some ways, as a podcast listener, and I have a podcast app on my phone, and what happens is that I'll refresh and it'll show me new episodes, and between the thumbnail and the podcast episode artwork and the title, I will go, hey, I want to download this and add it to a list to listen to later on. And the thing I've noticed is sometimes people will do a podcast artwork that's completely different. And sometimes I will
Yeah.
accidentally skip shows that I would ordinarily want to listen to every single time. So we'll talk about that more in the next segment. But I do think it's definitely worth exploring. But again, we're exploring opportunities and possibilities today. We're not going to tell you there's one right way of doing anything. So take it as you will and see how you go. Hello to Walter Strong the Third from Real Men Rising, which is his new show. Thank you for joining us. So this is the video and live streaming show, and today we're talking all about thumbnails. So in some ways we'll talk about as we continue through today's show, thinking about your branding and your assets and potentially putting those things together in a content library, how we can actually create these and some of the software that you might want to use and the technical dimensions and specifications, and also that thing that was kind of the bane of my existence, the ABC testing options on YouTube, which I'm still, and that's the reason why this is the therapy couch, because Sam and I had a discussion about it, and it was so potentially much worse than I was even imagining. So we're going to come back and we'll talk about branding in just a second.
We are constantly training our cats every interaction that we have with them.
Mm-hmm.
So when Johan would get on my counter before, this is 10 years ago, before I was the cat expert that I am now, Johan would jump on the counter. What was the first thing I did? I'd say his name, Johan. He loves that. That's a reward for him. He said, you just said my name. I would go over to him and I'd talk to him and be like, you can't be on the counter. Johan loves when I talk to him. Ding, that's another reward for Johan. I'd pick him up and put him on the ground, but I didn't want him to think I was mad at him. So when I'd pick him up very nicely and kiss him on the head and say, I love you, but you can't be here. I'd put him on the ground. I had just done 3 things that rewarded him for being on the counter. So I was encouraging him to continue doing that.
And that's a little promo for Sam's podcast, Just Kidding Around, which you can learn more about over at cuteavalanche.com. But this is the video and live streaming show. Today we're talking all about video thumbnails as part of the video thumbnail therapy couch. So if they've been driving you a little bit nuts, and candidly, they certainly have been driving me nuts, we want to talk about it. We want to sort of explore some of the options that you might have available to you today. So I guess in some ways, the thing that I alluded to earlier, Sam, was that in some ways, you might search somebody out via the content, via the specifics of the things that you want to watch. But over time, you'll probably have particular creators that you like and you want to revisit.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways, it's really important that people can easily differentiate between your content and somebody else's in terms of the thumbnail. So what are some of the things that we might want to think about in terms of branding our video thumbnails?
Yeah, for sure. I think when people find a video, it's from one of 2 ways, which is either they go and they're specifically searching for something, in which case this is, maybe going to help and maybe it's not as much. But in a lot of cases, it's because they visited you and watched a video in the past, or they subscribed to you. So having sort of reoccurring branding things happening on your thumbnail will kind of reinforce, oh yeah, this is that video, this is that guy that talks about live streaming, or whatever it is. So you want to look at having a small set of colors that you're reusing, certain fonts that you reuse, and maybe a few specific images. Like when I make a thumbnail, I try and keep it very minimalist. You don't want to give too much information, because then people might be looking at the wrong thing. Honestly, if you put, a whole bunch of different crazy stuff on there, they might be like, is this a video about airplanes or about Jello pudding? I don't know what's happening here. But, if you keep it to like 3 to 5 elements and like 2 to 4 words, so, there's a whole wave of creators out there who aren't putting words on their thumbnails right now at all. So honestly, you could jump on that bandwagon, or maybe this is the time to start really paying more attention to the words you are putting on your thumbnail, because there's, you know, it'll stand out. It might stand out more. Can't say it will, but it might. Like, so yeah, I think those are really important things. Is create that style guide, which I do for every channel, every project, and you're going to have, you know, 3 to 5 colors and 2 or 3 fonts, and you'll basically say like, this is my main font, right? I want something that is extremely legible if it's big or really small, because people are going to be, scrolling through on mobile. And if you have a fancy cursive font, they're not going to see that at all. Don't worry about putting your branding on there. Your channel logo's right next to it. If you're doing like, like John tries to put both of us on the thumbnails all the time, and I'm like, I mean, if it makes sense, it makes sense. But if in my world, having one big face is better than 2 small faces. So like those are kind of the things that I think about when I go into creating a thumbnail, and having that sort of reoccurring face does superimpose you as the brand as well. So those are kind of the things I look at when I am creating a style guide for my thumbnails.
Absolutely, and I feel like we've ranted a little bit about those cursive fonts, but people love those cursive fonts, and they're just so hard to read.
Not a blog.
I would, the bolder, and I think that's the thing. In some ways, this is not necessarily the place to be subtle. You want to think about the color contrast. You want to think about, how the weight of your fonts, how much space you're actually taking up. And again, I guess in some ways, like the reason I put both of us in those thumbnails, although occasionally I've done something where I'll have me on one thumbnail and you on a different thumbnail, and we can, because this content goes out on all kinds of different channels, we can sort of opt for those as well. But I mean, the reason I do that is because it's a show of the two of us, and it just seems fair to do that. But in some ways, that can be tricky, because I think the sort of de facto standard in some ways is to have some text on the left-hand side, a person's face possibly reacting on the right-hand side, maybe a little bit of color, a little bit of graphics in there as well. But I just wanted to, this question from Walter I think is a good one. So how much time do you and Sam dedicate to taking new photos for future video thumbnails? Not very much time at all. And I wish I was a little bit more organized so I could show you this. But one day, Sam, and I think it was in his old place, just took 30 photos of him just reacting to different things. And it's hilarious. And I've got them saved on my computer. And I think that's the thing. Like, I could go and take new photos every day. And the thing I actually do is because I have some really nice Elgato key lights here, like I can take them here. And I'm pretty well lit. And then I can just remove the backgrounds and I can rearrange those however I like. So it kind of just depends. And I think the great thing about Sam being this old school YouTuber is he's got all the reaction shots. And there are some that I use a lot because I just think they're really, really funny and sort of captivating. Like he's pointing to things, or his mouth's wide open and he's shocked. And
right.
I think anyone that's been on my channel for a hot second will know that there are certain photos especially of me, that I reuse all the time. And in some ways it's probably just because I'm kind of lazy and I should go and take some more, but I just haven't got around to it yet.
We probably should do more photos more often that are more relevant, but it's a time thing, right? You're either going to put time or effort or money into this, and we're trying to do everything for free. We're trying to do everything, as fast as we can. This is a weekly show. We don't have, that much time, and it's just the two of us, right? We both have jobs and lives and all of that stuff. So, if you're out there and you can take a new photo for every video, do that for sure. Like if you're, doing something that is very specific, like you're doing product reviews, having that picture of you and the product, probably better than just random stock photo of you and superimposed image of the product. It shows that that authenticity of like, here's this thing, it's with me. Clearly, I am actually reviewing this, as opposed to like, everyone else who does just, it's me. And then I found a stock image that all the other thumbnails also have, right?
Mm.
So it does give it a more original thing, but it's a
And
time thing.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's the truth about everything is like there's a point of diminishing returns. So I mean, you could
Yeah.
spend, and I know there are people, and again, if you have a team, if you're a large business, if you've got a dedicated person that does
Yeah.
nothing but make video thumbnails, then you know the world is your oyster. But I don't think that's true of most people.
Yeah.
But I just want to check out this comment from Ender. So I do agree with having your face on the thumbnail. It
Oh yeah.
also adds trust, in my opinion. I think that's true. I mean, people
Yeah.
like people, and they faces are great. You can sort of think about where your eyes are pointing, whether they're actually just straight ahead in kind of the fashion that we are in today, or whether they're looking to the side, maybe where you've got the subject matter of your thumbnail. Again, Ender, although Ender notes people read from left to right, so this is important of where the text is too. But again, culturally, that varies.
That does. But also, if you're familiar with the golden ratio and sort of that ever diminishing spiral, get that. That is a great sort of layout guide to how you should have elements, because yes, people will have a flow, but there is a psychology to that, and you can totally direct them back so that they just continue. There is, the best thumbnails, people will kind of go from element 1 to 2 to 3 and back to 1, and that's why you want to keep it simple. You don't want 20 different things on there, and if you can find that thing that keeps the eye sort of going, they'll spend just that millisecond more on your thumbnail, and maybe you've hooked them.
Mm-hmm. And Suan writes, I go back and forth on whether to use the face or not. Also being told to drop some branding for clarity on thumbnails. So again, like, it's kind of up to you. But again, I think the important thing is, and often we design these things on computers. We have really large, beautiful screens. But what you've got to think about
Yeah.
is that it's going to be shrunk down on a phone. It's going to be tiny. And at that point...
Yeah.
There's probably only a few elements you've got space to include if you're doing that at a large size, which again we kind of recommend that you do. So that's definitely worth exploring. Again, Kai says, "What is your recommendation for the text on the thumbnail? Should it be different from the video title?"
Absolutely. There's no point in repeating what's in the title in the thumbnail. As I kind of alluded to earlier, I use my thumbnail text to try and create some sort of question for the user or create an emotional reaction. And then the title should clarify what that is. Like, you know, to be good. Like the only example I can think right now is super extreme. Like, this kitten was gonna die, and then we saved 20 kittens from a shelter or something like that. You want to give something a little bold, maybe not quite that sensational. That's a little much, but yeah, create a reaction and then clarify what you're going to deliver on in the video. And then again, in those first 5 seconds of the video, you better prove that you're going to deliver on it.
And I agree with Saeed here. He writes, I think it should be additional to the title, add value, not repeat what's already said in the title. And I guess the thing is too, your title probably should be a complete sentence or a question, whereas you probably only have space for 2 or 3 words if you're using a large font on the thumbnail. So again, it may just be the content of the the subject matter, if you will, just to give some people a visual clue in that regard. Suan, and I just want to say I love all the chatter in the comments today. This is great. Amazing. I love your contributions. Thank you so much for being here. So Suan writes, I say definitely different copy on the thumb as a rule, 2 ways to hook folks, and a way to grab attention on visual, then explain it further with the title. And Ender sort of optimizes for SEO keywords or questions and repeats the same text in thumbnails, and that works for him. Okay, cool. All right. I love Walter's ability to ask great questions, and this wasn't even on our agenda, but I think it's worth talking about. So, what is the main way, Sam, that you send your photos to John to make your collab process flow smoothly? Examples: Google Drive or OneDrive.
Yeah, I believe we've used primarily Google Drive in the past, though when I work with clients, I send a lot of things through WeTransfer, but generally that's because I'm doing video and it's bigger, and my Google Drive is very full.
And I'm pretty invested in what was called G Suite. I don't even know what they call it anymore. It's been rebranded several times, but I've got like 2 terabytes worth of storage, I think, on my Google Drive, so I can just, and everything sort of lives there. So sometimes we transfer videos, certainly images. I'll have my show run documents, and incidentally, because of the way we've changed the way the show is going, there's a number of extra steps for me now. And the really nice thing about
Yeah.
Google Docs is it actually has a list item style, which is literally a checkbox. So you can just really easily create a list and then just click the box, and once you've done those things. Ender's saying his opinions are controversial today. I don't know if that, again, in some ways, like, we're not here to tell you what's right or wrong. We're just here to explore things. And if they work for you, then there's probably no reason to change.
Right. But also at the end of this, we're going to show you how to tell if they really work for you or not. I did want to, like, this was actually something that I was going to do later on, but since we're talking about just how your thumbnails show up and stuff like that, there's a few tools out there that I do use that are really helpful. So you can sort of see, what it's going to look like at various sizes, and also what your thumbnail looks like next to a bunch of other thumbnails. So those 2 tools that I do like to use are thumbnailpreview.com and thumbsup.tv. And you can hit me up on Twitter and be like, what were those tools, Sam? And I'll send it to you.
Absolutely. Okay. So I guess one other point I kind of want to make before we move on to the next segment is that I think we need to talk about templates. I think templates can be incredibly useful, but I think they can also be potentially a problem. So
Sure.
we'll talk about a piece of software that comes with its own templates in the next segment, but the thing that, and templates can be really beautiful, they can be wonderful, they can be a great starting point, but there's always that danger that you'll look like everybody else using that same template.
Yes.
So in some ways, what I kind of encourage you to do is create your own template, and whether you can take inspiration for other people's content in that way, which is fine to get inspiration, but then think about how that applies to your brand and your colors and your fonts and your style. Because I think in some ways, we don't want to be like everybody else, because we will just blend in and be completely unremarkable in that regard. And I guess my snarky take on templates generally is they're often created without any understanding of your content. So they will often make things outside of your content really, really pretty and elaborate. And I think about the resume templates that will just have the word resume in 100 point fonts, and it'll be really stylized and calligraphied and all of the things. But again, it has nothing to do with you as the person that has the resume. So that's certainly something you might want to think about. Do you have any thoughts on that, Sam?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we're all talking about Canva. And Canva is great for a free software, but yes, don't fall into the trap of using the built-in templates. This is the reason you build a style guide. This is the reason you know what colors you want, what fonts you want, and even to some extent, the 1 or 2 font effects that you're going to use. And once you've got those, you can actually go into a pre-existing Canva template, switch out all of their fonts to your fonts, put the colors in that are your colors, which Canva actually makes very easy, and add any kind of effects. And then you can see whether or not that still works for your content, shift things around and kind of make it your own, or start from a blank canvas and go crazy. Because I often find that, like, the things I want to do are, of course, on the pro plan, which you can easily recreate on your own because they're not that complicated. And then you just make your own template and duplicate it and, move those elements around a little bit, but you've already got, the things in place to maximize your workflow and be like, great, I just duplicate this. I'm going to shift 2 or 3 things, change the words, and add a different stock image. And boom, there's my, my new cover.
Nice. And Suan writes, I like snitching cool elements from templates or peruse them for design ideas. And I think that can be
Yeah,
really
that's good.
useful. And I actually have a folder on Google Drive where I just save design inspiration. And again, I'm not copying these things exactly as they are, but again, I will look at different treatments and think, there might be something in there that's worth exploring. I guess the last comment I'll make about templates before we move on is just that it's often like even if you create one for yourself, it's often a good idea to have a few different variations because I guess the tension here is that you want people to recognize you when they see your thumbnails, but you don't really want them to all look exactly the same because that
No.
just becomes boring and people tune that out over time. So think about experimenting a little bit, and we'll talk about how we can do that in software in a moment. But yeah, it's often a really good idea to sort of explore all the different things that we have available to us. So this is the video and live streaming show. We're going to come back and talk about some of the technical specifications of YouTube thumbnails specifically, and also some of the software that you might like to use. Hi, I'm John Lacey, and in Build a Presentation Muscle, I want to talk about finding your voice, refining and sharing your message, using tools and technology to share that message, and looking after yourself as a creator. And that's a promo for my podcast, Build a Presentation Muscle, the podcast about showcasing your expertise through content creation, which you can learn more about over at johnlacey.com. But this is the video and live streaming show. I'm John Lacey, and I'm joined as always by Sam Proof. Today on the show, we're kind of on the therapy couch when it comes to video thumbnails, and we're here mostly because they were driving me nuts, and I kind of needed to talk about it. So that's what we're doing today. But let's talk about how we can actually create some video thumbnails. So I guess, first of all, Sam, basically any graphic software that can resize a canvas and can save to specific file formats is doable. So I know you have a preference towards Canva, but do you have any advice generally on how we might choose a piece of software?
Yeah, I mean, see what you already have available to you. If you're someone who has the Adobe suite through work or just freelance, whatever, obviously Photoshop is great. Even Illustrator would be, worthy to make thumbnails. I like Canva. If you're looking for something a little more powerful than Canva, you could get like GIMP or a similar free software that isn't Adobe's, Photoshop. And if you're willing to give up more control, there's a slew of just AI things out there that will make thumbnails for you. I have yet to find one that I was like, oh, that's good. But Microsoft has one that is, I think it's Design or Designer, and it's pretty close to a Canva experience. It will basically allow you to attach an image or two. It can do some generative stuff, but it will spit out about 20 different designs, which you can then manipulate after the fact. So it's, like an AI Canva. So it's not bad. It does obviously have like limited amount of free usage, and then they want you to buy it. But yeah, there's tons of options out there.
Absolutely. I guess the thing that I like to mention, just because, I don't know, Adobe is not my favorite company in the world,
Yeah.
Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo are reasonably equivalent programs to sort of Illustrator and Photoshop, and they're so much cheaper. And
Yep.
you sort of pay for them outright. It's not like the monthly subscription for the rest of time. So you might like to check that out. GIMP, which Sam alluded to, is free and open source. It's cross-platform.
Yeah.
So if you really don't have any budget, that's a great place to start. But there really are, and Canva as well. I don't spend any time in Canva, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that it's not my favorite. And in fact, my favorite, and prepare to have your minds blown if you're new here, I actually use Microsoft PowerPoint as a graphics tool. I don't use it to make slides. But I use it as a graphic design tool. And it's funny because I can remove backgrounds from images, I can add text, I can add effects really easily, and I sort of The thing I love about that way of working is that I can duplicate designs 3 or 4 times and then work on some variations until I've sort of figured out what I want to actually ultimately share. And it's not to say that you can't do that in other graphics programs. Certainly, things like Photoshop have. I'm just trying to think of what they're actually called. Artboards, I think they're called in Photoshop. So you
Yeah.
can sort of have multiple designs in the same document. And I think that's really worthwhile because I think sometimes you'll have a number of different ideas and you want to try them all out, and you probably should, but just make sure you don't ruin your first attempts, because sometimes you will do 5 or 6
Yep.
goes and then you'll go, actually the first one was the best. So I'm glad I got that out of my system, but the first one is the one we're going with. So that's certainly
That is
something you
also
can
why I
do.
like Canva, is because it's so easy to like duplicate and then just manipulate a second version of what you're working on. Saeed also mentions Figma and Photopea, which I don't think I've ever used. I may have used Figma at one point, but yeah, those are both free softwares as well. And as a weird outlier, I know there's a couple guys out there who, this is the real mind blower, use OBS to make their thumbnails. And while I find that completely crazy, at the same time, if you are a live streamer and that is what you're using to make your thumbnails, and honestly makes some amount of sense, because you are giving exactly what you'd be streaming potentially as the thumbnail. So I'm like, maybe if that works for you, that works for you. I can't even wrap my head around how they're doing it, but they're out there.
I mean, it's like all you need to do essentially is create a scene, add your text, maybe yourself, and you image, and just go that screenshot option. So,
I suppose,
screenshot
yeah.
preview, yeah, and you can set up a button for that on the Stream Deck. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of ways, and in a lot of ways, it doesn't really matter how you get there as long as it works for you, and also. Like, it does meet some technical specifications, and I know these aren't the sexiest thing in the world, but I want to touch on them briefly. So, your thumbnail should be as large as possible. It will be, and this is advice from Google. It will be used as the preview image in the embedded player. We recommend the following: so have a resolution of at least 1280 by 720. With a minimum width of 640 pixels, be uploaded in image formats such as JPEG, GIF, or PNG, remain under 2 megabytes for videos, or 10 megabytes for podcasts, which is interesting, and of course have that 16:9 ratio. So again, it's worth keeping those in mind, because obviously, if you export it into a different file format, then you won't be able to use it, and you'll have to think about how you're working with that as well. Okay, so, and this is a question for our Canva user, Sam. So this is from Walter. Sam, do you use folders within Canva to help organize your thumbnails? If yes, what are some of your favorite ways?
Yeah, so I actually have multiple profiles, and then I have folders, and then I have projects. So Sam Proof has its own profile, Cute Avalanche has its own profile, and then within like Cute Avalanche, I have a folder for the podcast, and a folder for just like general stuff, and like social stuff and all of that. And then within that, there's just multiple projects, and sometimes multiple versions of the same kind of projects, because I brand specifically if I have YouTube videos and they're in a specific series, like we do clips of our Twitch live stream on the YouTube. That's its own branding. It's the same colors and fonts and stuff, but there's slight variance, so that visually when you're on the page, you're like, okay, these are all the clips. This other project here, these are all the vlogs, and so on and so forth.
Nice. And Saeed mentions that he sometimes makes those OBS thumbnails in his workshop just for fun, pointing at stuff or making faces just in case he needs a thumbnail later on. And I guess that's the thing, like in any sort of video editing software, you can go to an individual frame and you can just take a screenshot or export an image of that and play with it to your heart's content. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter how you get there as long as you get there. But Suan sort of understands my struggle of like doing dozens of titles or thumbnail designs and then landing on the first one. Sometimes the first one is the best, but again, sometimes you've got to do that design exploration to convince yourself of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so You know, Sam, you kind of alluded to this earlier, and if you're new here, you may not know this, but it's my least favorite subject, but I think we need to touch on it anyway. Um, AI is a thing, and it's the
It
thing that you
is.
could potentially use to create video thumbnails. Again, AI isn't something I touch with a barge pole, but again, Sam, what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different places that are offering AI thumbnails right now. Again, the Microsoft Designer, TubeBuddy, vidIQ, I think has their version of this. There's probably 2 dozen of these things, and it, if you just absolutely have no free time to kind of manipulate your own, if you have no money to go on Fiverr and get the $20 thumbnail from somebody else, then maybe that's for you. Um, I have not been blown away by the results of AI. I do think um, the Microsoft Designer, out of the 3 examples I gave, is the winner because it is a lot more manipulative. You have a lot more control over it in the sort of post creation process. Whereas TubeBuddy and vidIQ, it's like very limited on fonts and effects, and really just the creation at all. So like it might be worth playing with. Uh, I can do everything I want with Canva just as quickly.
Just as a side note, though, that same sort of AI feature is also built into Microsoft PowerPoint, and it will literally, like, if you have 3 things on a slide, it will give you like 30 options to rearrange them. And
Yeah.
again, because of who I am and my need to be a control freak, I can't close that tab quick enough. I don't want any part of it. But again, if you're, it could inspire something. So I mean, if you want to explore it, by all means. I know even
Yeah.
StreamYard sort of introduced a thing where when you're creating your new stream, it can generate thumbnails, and it will actually grab things from like your YouTube profile image as a starting point
That's
as
right.
well. So
Yeah. It's kind of in the same bucket as TubeBuddy and vidIQ's ability to create the thumbnail. It's not amazing. The nice thing about the Microsoft Designer version is that you can actually create sort of a brand um, palette. So you can put like I think 3 or 4 colors, and I think you can designate a couple of fonts as well. So at least it has that to go off of, which is of course helpful.
absolutely. Okay, so this is the video and live streaming show. Hello to Insomnia Doodles, who's lurking. Great to have your company today. We were talking about video thumbnails and how they're the bane of my existence, and why I needed to get it off my chest and talk about it today. So we've been doing that. We've been talking about, why video thumbnails are important, why you want to think about your branding and sort of collating your assets, how you might actually go about creating them. And in a moment, we're going to come back. Well, actually, I say we're going to come back. We don't have a promo, so we're going to get stuck into it straight away. Let's talk about testing. So,
All right.
YouTube quite recently have released this ABC sort of video thumbnail testing options, Sam. So, what do we need to know about that?
Yeah, so this is available to everyone. I think at this point it's been rolled out to all of the channels, but it could still be slowly rolling out as we speak. I don't know. But essentially, what this is the ability to upload 2 or 3 thumbnails that go on your video, and then it will randomly pick one of those thumbnails and show it to a viewer. And as the results come in, it will tell you whether or not one thumbnail performs better than the others. Um, I have noticed that you do have to have a decent amount of traffic to really get results on this. So, like, I've done a lot of sort of older videos to try and see what this works like. And they just don't get enough traffic for it to actually analyze. So I have to like see going forward on some of the newer ones what that looks like at this point. But yeah, it's potentially a great tool. And the way you want to use this at the beginning when you're first putting a video out, first doing your test, is do some very broad strokes. Like, maybe you want to test out a few theories like, is a face really worth it? So you have one, thumbnail that is a close up of a face, maybe one thumbnail that has no human in it whatsoever. And, who knows, whatever your third version of that is. But make some broad strokes, get the results, and then keep refining it. yeah, this is the part that John is going to hate, is you never stop. Like you could just keep doing this ad nauseum until like 100 iterations down. You're like, I can't possibly think of anything else I would change here. This is the one.
And that's kind of the crux of this entire episode was like I was complaining to Sam how hard it was to create one video thumbnail, and I don't want to do three, and he's like, no, that's only the beginning. You do three, and then you test another three and another three for the rest of time.
Right.
Which I personally don't think is a great use of my time, and I probably won't be doing. But I guess the other thing we do need to acknowledge is, at the moment, this is only for YouTube videos, so the VODs, the videos on demand. It doesn't work with lives, it doesn't work with shorts, as Roy, Tech Troublemaker, is noting in the chat as well.
Yes.
And in fact, let me just show you what this looks like. So basically, if you go into your YouTube options and go into the settings there, find a video. There's actually an ellipsis beside the existing thumbnail. If you click on that one and go down to test and compare, you'll get this dialog box that pops up, and you can essentially add 3 different thumbnails here and click done. Again, as Sam notes, you kind of need a fairly decent sample size. So depending on the health of your channel at the moment, it may or may not give you particularly definitive results. But again, it's a free option. It's fun to play with. I would be curious to see how people have been experiencing with that, although obviously it's quite new, so maybe they haven't had a lot of experience with it just yet. And I guess the thing that's worth noting too is I think historically TubeBuddy and vidIQ have had some version of this for many years, and they've just sort of brought it into YouTube. And it's been a feature that's been planned for years, I'm sure, and has finally reached us. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, like once you've done that sort of initial broad sweep, like, 3 very different things, it doesn't have to be really that complex to do like those next iterations. Like can literally be like, well, what if I'm smiling in like this one, and what if the background's purple in this one? Like you're just changing one thing per thumbnail at that point to be like, all right, let's hone in on this. I always like to use Montserrat, but maybe New Wave is the font I should go with. And there you go. That's the change. Just one thing for those new versions.
And say it says A/B testing is like the thumbnail playoff. So I mean, it potentially could be. And again, I love the enthusiasm that Sam brings to this. And again, if you've got someone dedicated on your team, if you've got someone who just loves the data science of all of this, definitely check it out.
And if you don't, then talk to me. I totally would be interested in working for other channels to do this for people.
And that's the thing, like you have to be ever so careful about using words like YouTube and thumbnail on social media, because I've been spammed within an inch of my life by all the Fiverr type people. But anyway, I just want to dig back into some of these comments. So I think so Kai writes, I think AI can help create a description or to suggest captivating words for the thumbnail if you let AI analyze your video, but I'm not convinced of the visual content yet. And I guess that's the other thing. I see a lot of these generated thumbnails, and they're very, in terms of the color, they're very saturated, they're very stylistic. They often have a go at creating a cartoony version of the person that was featured in the original thumbnail. I don't personally love them, but I see this as a bit of a trend that's out there in the wild, and it's definitely something that you could explore if you're interested in doing that. I don't even remember the name of the tool that that people are using, but Sam may know it. I'm not really sure.
I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of options, and again, and I think it harks back to something somebody, I think it was Ender actually said earlier, was seeing a real person does potentially build that trust. So, and a lot of people that I see using these have professional photos of themselves that are really beautifully taken, and yet they still reach for these generated ones. I don't particularly understand why, but that's up to you, I suppose. Saeed makes an interesting point. So he writes, when was the last time you actually read a description before watching the video? I mean, Well, you kind of can't. But I guess what you can do potentially is search for something that may be in the video description that isn't necessarily in
Yeah.
the title. But
Right.
again, like you have all these options out there. Seed also asks about the what does the auto generated do? I'm pretty sure. In fact, I'm going to try this in the background. I'm not going to share my screen because I haven't actually set that up. But again, the auto generated is literally this: select an image from your video to use as a thumbnail. So YouTube will grab one of three frames from your video, and you can just select which one of those you want as the thumbnail. So that's all that does, and that's been a thing that's been there forever. But they've retitled it as auto generated, which feels a little bit misleading, but it is what it is.
Right.
Okay, and Kai says, I actually read the description, e.g. for this live show, or when I look for specific content for tutorials, I read the timestamp. So I guess that's a good point. And again, we can't use this ABC testing for live streams yet. Hopefully that'll come sometime in the future. But, you know, if there is an event that's scheduled, you probably click on it, you'd check out the video thumbnail, the title, and the description to get a sense of whether you want to be notified about when it goes live.
Yeah.
Okay, and Said says that makes sense. Hello to Stefan, who's joining us from Sweden. I love that we have such a European contingent these days. And I know it's very late at night for some of you, so thank you for joining us. That's really cool. So yeah, I guess, you know, in some ways, and again, we're just here to explore options. We don't want to overwhelm you. We don't want to give you a giant list of things to do. But think about, you know, some of the ways that you might streamline your process, and even if that's just creating a few different templates for yourself, and you can go in and you can grab those and change and you know, generate them. You can always go back and edit these things. So it's a great opportunity. So if you decide, you know, in 3 months' time, everything about your branding has changed, you can certainly go back in and change those video thumbnails if it makes sense to, but maybe, you know, you just leave them as is. So do you have any final thoughts on sort of testing? I know you've sort of outlined your basic philosophy on it, but any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I mean, yeah, I think if you do have enough traffic, the A/B testing is really useful on some of those older videos you have to like maybe give them new life. So, you know, don't pass that off. Like, don't think this is just for videos going forward. Like, this might be the way to get that video from last year to pop off again.
Nice. Yep. So it's a great opportunity to revisit those things. And again, like, especially if you do change up an old video thumbnail, I think that's a great opportunity to resurface that on your community tab as well. So that's the thing, you know, as your channel grows, you'll get a whole bunch of new people that probably haven't seen the old stuff. And if it is perennial, if it is worth revisiting, by all means, encourage people to do that.
Yeah. And also it does give you additional talking points for the rest of your social media. Like, it doesn't have to just be put out there on the YouTube. Like, you now have 3 thumbnails you can put out on your Twitter and be like, let's do an A/B test here. Tell me which one of these thumbnails you like. So great. Now you have stuff to like, you know, talk about on Twitter.
Nice. Okay. So Sam, as we begin to wrap up, where can people find you? What's your content? All that good stuff.
Yeah. Head over to my website, samproof.tv. You can scan that QR code, and all of my socials are at the top left. So if there was a website or something that I talked about and you want more information on it, or you want to bring me on to run your channel for thumbnails, you can contact me that way. And there was like no cat talk except for the promo this week, so I apologize, but you can go over to cuteavalanche.com and get 24/7 cats on the cat cams. Enjoy that.
And I must admit, there was a bit of a kitten feeding just before we went live, so I certainly heard that. That was nice. But yes, if you do want to do that, you can head over to cuteavalanche.com. But if you want to find out anything I'm up to, you can head over to johnlacey.com. I got a whole bunch of articles and the podcasts. And of course, all the links, the social links are at the bottom of those pages, so you can definitely check that out. Okay, cool. So I must admit, this is the second show we've done completely out of OBS, and I love it, but I've got to remember where all the buttons on my Stream Deck are because I'm doing a lot of different things all at once. So thank you so much for everybody. And again, I just want to, because the chat's just on fire. Let's revisit some of these before we go.
Yeah,
Suan writes, repurposing your content helps stretch your reach. Thanks, guys.
for
Yes,
sure.
and I think that's a lesson I've had to learn recently because I often have the best of intentions to repurpose stuff, and I may or may not have time. And lately, I feel this internal push to always be making new stuff, and I have to remind myself that we've done 80 plus versions of this show. I've got all kinds of nuggets that are just waiting there, and as someone who does like editing video, it's not a massive thing for me to whip up a clip. So that's something I actually did this week, and I think it's really worthwhile. Um, and Saeed writes, does it make sense in general to update thumbnails for very old content? Do you want to take that one, Sam?
Yeah, for sure. I think you have to ask yourself if a video is just dead or if a video has just gone, unloved. If it's getting a small amount of traffic and at one point it was really doing quite well, then I think this would be the video that you want to look at. Whereas if you've got something that was like just kind of an video, don't waste your time, right? Like check check your content and be like, what is a strong video that I just feel didn't get enough love? And is it something I just want to reshoot and do a whole new video on, or can I bring back to life this older version? And if you think the original video was strong enough on its own, it's not like there's a whole new lot of new stuff to say about it, then changing up the thumbnail, changing up the title, changing up the description might be the thing. It might be worth, like, how much time is that really? A few hours?
Yeah, and I think that there's probably a deeper question about how perennial is that content anyway,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
and I mentioned this to Sam during the week, but a number of his older YouTube shorts have been surfacing for me, and they were incredibly newsworthy, but they haven't dated particularly well. But they're suddenly being shown to me for reasons I don't completely understand.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it is what it is. So
yeah,
sometimes that's just how we roll. But yeah,
yeah,
it
yeah.
just depends on what you're actually looking for, and how whether it makes sense. Because again,
Yeah.
sometimes you want to push people to your new content. Sometimes you want to revisit something that's a little bit old. Sometimes people will surface stuff themselves because they're looking for particular things, or the algorithm might just randomly give you some love. Who knows? It's all a bit of a mystery at
Yeah.
times.
But also within YouTube, there are ways to sort of try and breathe new life into a video aside from just the things we talked about. Like, you can turn it into a clip or just a vertical video that redirects to it, or a live stream that has it as a trailer. So potentially, if you do that stuff and give it a shiny new thumbnail and title, maybe all of those things work in concert. But it's about how much time do you have available to do that, and is it more important to say, I put so much work into this one thing and I think it could do better, or do I want to just recreate that thing?
Absolutely. And Kai says, thank you both for your encouragement and the value you provide to us. I take some super interesting thoughts from you
Nice.
with me. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We do actually have a really super special guest coming on the show next week, and I'm not going to tell you who it is. I'm just going to tease it. And I've got to think about how we're actually going to do the show next week.
Yeah.
Technically, but we'll figure that out. So it'll happen roughly at the same time. Just look out for those announcements wherever you see our stuff. And on that note, don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you happen to be watching that. And have a great week, have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon.